So sales and growth and what do we need to do? We can knock it all out, answer everything in 25, 30 minutes, right? We'll know everything we need to know. What I would say is we've got probably 50 people in the room today. Those 50 people, they go back to the business, they've got 5 more people or 15 more people or 20 more people. Now we have hundreds of people, and we all have a different perspective. We all have a different problem that we need to solve for. So I'm not a stand-up comedian. We're not solving everything in 25 or 30 minutes. So don't, lower the bar, lower the bar so I can hop over it. But in any case, I'm from Cleveland. If you haven't figured that out yet, or if you hadn't read the profile, I'm from Cleveland. Background's in enterprise B2B sales. I sold call center solutions into the enterprise, like into AT&T, BMW Financial down here in Dublin was a client of mine for a long time. About 10 years ago, I had the if not now when epiphany, compelling events, having kids, getting married, buying a house. Am I going to do this forever? Do I want to do something different? And so I decided to quit my job. I figured I had like 2 months, 3 months maybe to figure it out. And and my buddy said, burn the boats though. He goes, don't try to do it on the side, because I thought maybe I'm going to do it a side hustle, just a gig. The fractionals weren't a thing then at that time. But he said, no, just burn the boats, and go ashore. And so I did. And I got the first $1,500 check from some company, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Somebody will pay me. I don't know what they're paying me for, but they'll pay me. But I started this company called Sun. It has to do with the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun. Does not have to do with energy, but that did come into play later on. And I did that because of family. And somebody told me when you start a company, and most of you know this, when you start a company, it's hard. It's going to get hard. So you need to always remember why you started. And I thought, well, I'll just name the company Sun, and it'll be easy. And that did not disappoint. It has been hard. There's ups and downs and valleys and peaks, and that's just one day. So that's not the whole ride. So I'm going to read the last line of the summary here for what we're going to do today. Understanding the difference between driving sales and achieving growth, we together, can focus on stage-appropriate actions to transform businesses wherever they might be in their journey. As I mentioned before, no two journeys are the same here. But over the last 10 years, and what I do, I guess I should say that as well. What I do, and the reason why I feel compelled to do this is I was the first salesperson at the contact center company that I worked with that sold into a market. And so when they said, hey, we're going to go into this space, what do I do? Do we have a sales deck? Do we have pricing done? Do we have a CRM tool? All the basic blocking and tackling, which sounds super obvious to everybody here today, but we didn't have it. And then they were taking all this knowledge that they had and just trying, well, just go do this or just go talk to these people. And the owner had primarily led the sales efforts. They all knew him. He'd been to the conferences and, it was no problem. But we were going into a different market, someplace we didn't know. And so I felt like when I started my company, I could work with small businesses and mid-sized companies, and then later startups, and I didn't know a lot about that space. But I thought that I could help the founder, kind of operationalize, the small business owner operationalize their sales process to get to repeatable, scalable work. Now that sounds like a lot of stuff, but as I learned, nobody really wants to talk about that. They want to talk about what's on fire, and so I started talking about what's on fire more than that. But we can keep this interactive. I don't have a ton of slides because I wanted to keep it interactive. I started facilitating some events, and so I like the back and forth. Just courtesy to everybody here, if you can keep your comment to like 30 seconds if you have a question. If it's a little deeper than that, I'll stay over, and we can certainly talk about it, collectively as a group, if that's all right. Is that good? Is everybody good with that? Yeah. All right. My thing has been stuck here for a while. Okay, who's in the room today? Solopreneurs. Yes, many. Small businesses. Startups. Why do startups not call themselves small businesses? I'm still trying to figure that out, right? Yeah, so that's another topic as we come back. Middle market, middle market meaning, middle market, okay. And then salespeople. There's a bunch of salespeople in the room, right? We're all salespeople. That's why we're all here. We've got a couple college students here looking for jobs. Beef up your LinkedIn, right? See, there you go. So the next thing, I'm going the wrong way. So to the whiteboard. Now, what's funny is I talked to Amy a couple weeks ago, and I said, I'm going to do the whole thing on whiteboard. And then I thought, well, I don't know that that's a good idea because I've never done that before, so I wasn't going to do a PowerPoint. And it's good for the folks in the back that I didn't do that, and I'm not going to do a lot here. But what I would say is, can somebody just belt out a few sales challenges that they have? I want to start with sales.
Gatekeepers.
I'm sorry?
Gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers, all right, gatekeepers. Okay. Anybody else? I mean, there's no sales problems today. I mean, why are we here?
Retention.
Retention, all right, retention. Okay.
Identifying ideal client profile.
ICP, if I heard it correctly. ICP, is that a logo? Is it ICP? Is it the title? Is it Joe or Susie who has the title? I mean, we can talk about that more later. Anything else?
I guess run away through the sales process or the sales cycle.
So, like, fragment. I'm trying to.
Well, just trying to figure out how long it actually.
Oh, how long?
Take,
Yeah,
to
that's a great question. How long? So my board, I'm glad I didn't do the whole thing because my writing is horrible and I don't know if I can read it. Anything else? Yes?
The status quo.
Status quo of what?
What they're currently doing versus better.
So change. How can you displace an incumbent, get them to change? Change. That's a whole thing. That is. I'm putting this outside here. All right. Well, I'm going to get to this a little quicker because I know that we're up against time. So for me, I said earlier when I started this, I didn't know what I was doing. I still am figuring it out. You guys probably figured that out too already. But for me, as I've had these conversations, and so in my work that I've done the last 10 years or so, working with small businesses, industry agnostic, solopreneurs, to middle market companies, teams, no teams, whatever it is, primarily B2B. Technology, I was going to see how long I could go without saying AI, but you guys already jumped in there. That's another conversation for another time. But for me, people would call me and I'm trying to scale my thing. Like, how do I scale, right? How do I get to repeatable, scalable sales motion that I could forecast, some revenue? I mean, that's a worthy goal. And I was having a hard time with it. The last couple of months for me, and it's through literally hundreds, so I work with a number of VCs, accelerators, incubators. I used to actually do work with Greater Cleveland Chamber of Commerce, or Greater Cleveland Partnership, which is the largest chamber of commerce in the country, in conjunction with Jobs Ohio. So worked with hundreds and hundreds of these business owners. And it boiled down to basically two things. And again, there's a stage of things are on fire, and I need to get what done, to like, hey, things are fragmented. I need to fix this fragmentation. To I want to come up with this repeatable, this operating system that we talk about. And everybody has an operating system. Somebody said we have an operating system to move a couch. Like, you're going to grab that end, you grab this end. We're going to say 1, 2, 3. We're going to pick up and we're going to go out the door. That's a system, to move that couch. Accomplishing that same type of thing, with sales. So we have these things. So it came down for me for two things: identifying and building quality pipeline. So one, and navigating complex sales cycles and closing deals. That's it. I mean, if we can do those two things, we can do sales. The challenge is the problems are like, my leads suck. Anybody ever say that? Is it me or is it them? I sent out 8 proposals and nobody's calling me back. That nobody's ever had that happen before, I'm sure. So those are the things that we hear. Those are process. So this line, if I would write it, would be process. So there's process things. Why did you send 8 proposals? I don't know. Tell me why you sent 8 proposals. You think the problem is nobody's calling you back. The problem actually happened way over here when we were building pipeline. So oftentimes, like when we go to the doctor, it's happened to me. You think something's wrong. We all know, we've got the internet. We can all talk about what's wrong with us, right? And we go to the doctor and we tell them. And they're like, well, we're going to still take a look at you anyways. And then it's really just a symptom of another problem that started somewhere else, right? And that is really no different when it comes to sales. I'm going to do a quick time check here. Good. So anyhow, So putting this all together, for me, and I've used this analogy a few times, is like a puzzle. So we've all put together puzzles. I'm gonna scary moment. How do you put together a puzzle? I'm gonna take the puzzle, I'm gonna dump it out on a table. What are we doing? What's the first thing we do? Corners, edges. Corners and edges, that's great. People actually said that without me saying it, so thank you for helping me. And tell them I did not tell you to say that, all right? So we do that, we look for the corners, so the foundational pieces. So identifying, our ICP, right? Building pipeline, navigating the sales cycle, closing the deals, the edges that come along with it. And then we also find those parts that are already working, right? There's like 5 pieces stuck together. I have no idea where it goes, but I'm gonna stick it over here. Because I know I'm gonna need that, but it's good, that is good. And then we start putting things together because we recognize patterns, right? The sales process is no different. And once I got to the point where I started to boil it down to that, I could take those fundamental principles and I could work with a solopreneur. We could work with small businesses. We could work with enterprise because it all starts there with the customer. It's a very customer-centric sales approach. That makes sense? Any big questions, thoughts? You're crazy? Wouldn't be the first time? All right. So some items around identifying and building quality pipeline. Target market, some people said that, ICP, lead scoring, what lead is a good lead, how fast should we follow up with it? It's 1, 2, 3, ABC, green, green, yellow, red, however that lead scoring goes. Discovery, doing good discovery on the front end, understanding what questions we need to do to get to that next step, whatever that step is. And then pipeline management, where's stuff at? Why, we had a lead, we haven't talked to somebody for 6 months, why is that? So these are all sales tactics. There's nothing new in any of this for most of you, okay? So that's why I'm blowing through it a little quickly. Same thing on navigating sales cycles, competitive analysis, objection handling, value proposition, sales stages, like what are those mechanisms for us to get to that next stage? For me, if I'm working with somebody, and clients that I've worked with have found like to have a very simple 1, 2, 3, like I like to close deals in three steps. We have an initial call, discovery. I determine whether it's a good opportunity or not. We have a second call. I go deeper. I tell a little bit about them. There's a little give and get. Tell them a little bit about me. Tell them, get a little bit from them. We scope something out if it makes sense. And then we have a third call. The founders that I'm working with, I try to get them to dial into something if they haven't done anything already and start to get patterns. So they're like, hey, every time we do this, it's great, but after that third call, they always want to bring in somebody from compliance, right? So now it's not 3 calls anymore, it's 4, Well, we've got to do 1 of 2 things. Either we need to change our staging, right? We need to have 4 calls, or we don't have the second call unless compliance is in the room. But that's something that we have to learn, right? And again, sales tactics, a lot of us know this stuff already, but those are the sales pieces, to this. And again, industry agnostic, even B2C. I work primarily B2B, but these principles, even in a B2C environment, can be similar because we're working with partners, we're working with supply chain, we're working with others as well. And then organizational alignment. This is where I wrote change out here, and I have a whole host of things that go around change. And since I didn't write anything down, I'll talk about it, and then I'll take some feedback here too. So somebody said, I'm about to make my first VP hire. I'm the owner. I've been the owner for 15 years. I've hired a couple salespeople. They do all right. I'm buying a software company. I've got a hardware company. I think somebody said they build hardware or work with companies that build hardware. I'm gonna buy a software company. Too much going on. I don't have time to work, in this particular area. Questionable whether or not they were really doing it anyways, because it was probably the Wild West, but that's another issue. But I need to hire first VP of sales. Has anybody ever had to hire their first VP of sales? You want to, like, 30-second experience? You want to give a quick, like, how that went? Wrong person, wrong seat. That sounds like EOS. Oh, and that's why I have all these books up here. These are all my books that I read. Like, I was trying to go fast, but like everybody does audio books. So I like to still touch the book. Don't judge me though if some of the back pages look like they haven't been read, because sometimes I start here and then I end up doing audio anyways. But EOS, right butt, right seats, process, all that stuff. It's all good. Yeah, we'll talk about this later. Oh, I was really mad. This founding sales book, I was upset. Somebody was talking about, they wrote a book, and I was mad when I read this book because I should have wrote that book, because that guy made a lot of money, and I feel like I could have contributed heavily to that, even though I wasn't a technical founder. But in any case, so my first question, and again, this is organizational alignment. So this is where growth happens, right? It's sales, marketing, operations, customer success. We got customer success back there. Leadership. We got all those things to align, and then we have other things that are not sales tactics, per se, but it's the business model. Is it a project based? Is it subscription? Is it a SaaS model? Is it consumption? Does it work? Does it not work? Does it work in this market but not in that market? So these are growth things, right? So VP of sales. My first question is, why do you need to hire VP of sales? And I need to really understand that, and folks need to understand what they're really hiring for. Don't do it because you've seen it. Nothing bad, because you saw it in a playbook, right? You need to build your playbook around the fundamentals of what it is that you're doing. And so I like that you said build the playbook and then customize it to what you are doing, because I think a lot of times, too often, we'll download a job description, off the web, and now I have a VP of sales, but it doesn't really fit what motion you need. What if you're a company that has, you're scaling, you need it. I know I need an AE. We've determined you need an AE. What do you go hire? Do you go hire somebody brand new that you can train up? Do you go hire somebody from your competitor that's been around for 10 years? I've had companies that have raised money, so primarily in the tech space, venture-backed tech space, has raised a ton of money. They want to go hire a salesperson, an AE, and they're going to go to their competitor, what they perceive as their competitor. And that competitor's been around for 10 years, and they're selling. I mean, they're crushing it. The guy in New York, I can visually see him making $500,000-$600,000 a year, and they brought him over to help sell. This was an AI solution, and brought him over to help do that. The problem is they didn't ask how he got his leads before they hired him. Now, when you're a gritty startup where you're a small business, been around for 10 years, and you're the owner-led sales guy, and you're going to go hire the sales guy who's the best sales guy at the competitor they have down the street, that he wants to know where my leads are when I get here. Well, you got to roll up your sleeves and go get some leads. Well, I don't do that. Now we have misalignment within the organization, right? And through that misalignment, that's a challenge to growth. And what was the process? How do I go get leads? Like, do I just have budget? A lot of times people will say, hey, you know what? Really good salesperson. You're great. You need somebody to help do leads. You know what? Go hire somebody. You need marketing? Sure. Go get a marketing company. We'll help do some marketing for you. Now, that salesperson who's a really good salesperson knows nothing about onboarding a marketing company, doing diligence on them, knows nothing about managing. Now, I've got to manage somebody, and I hired you to sell, So I'm mad because 3 months later you haven't sold anything. Sales guy is mad because he hasn't sold anything either, and he doesn't have commission. There's misalignment there, right? So again, these are kind of getting in the weeds of tactics, but again, organizational alignment. So just think about it: sales, organizational alignment for growth. Excellent point. So as an owner who leads sales for some of your organizations, if I'm sitting in front of a prospect and they say they need something, I know we can do it. I don't really want to do it. I don't love doing it, but I can do it. You know what? I'm going to do it. We're going to do this. So I'm going to do this deal, right? So I come back to the office and say, hey, listen, we're doing this. Well, everybody knows we don't do it, but I'm the owner. So guess what? We're doing it, right? And we do it, and we're growing, man, we're killing it, And the owner's just selling everything, and then they're, why in the hell, nothing, being delivered the right way. You're killing your back office, to do that. So then the next step of that, and that goes on, and companies survive for 15, 20 years doing that, which is crazy, right? And then the next thing will happen is like, I'm going to hire somebody. None of that stuff is documented. What you just said, that's why that's Wild West. They're doing whatever they want to because nobody's told them not. And you're not measuring it. You're not monitoring it. You don't have a framework. You didn't say, hey, here's the playbook that we've customized to you to go execute on this thing. It takes 4 calls. These are the people that need to be in the room. This is the pricing model. And it's 4 months to get closed. And that's how long it takes. I mean, that would be amazing, And I will tell you this, too, while we're on this subject, because I think and it's not just hiring a VP of sales. It's hiring an SDR. You might be able to get away with it with an SDR because SDRs are trying to get in the business, right? So they might not have the experience to ask you the right questions. They should. And if anybody's working with SDRs that need coaching, I'm happy to talk to them. Just philanthropic hours. Happy. Oh, sales development rep. So the one who tees up the lead for that guy who was in New York who was making all the money, right? So in any case, if you hire good talent, because I want to go back to what I said earlier. People would say, business owner would say, it's hard to find good salespeople. They all suck, they're no good, And I was like, I don't know, do they? I mean, I wasn't very good. That's okay, right? PG-13, PG. But in any case, the challenge to that is, what have you done to help make them successful? Because you're going to hire somebody, and we talked about AI, and now I'm on a roll now, okay? People ask about AI. AI, Ray, you're going to talk about AI later, a couple weeks, right? I work with a lot of AI companies, so I'm interested in catching up with you. They want to know ROI. What's ROI, right? What's the ROI for you to hire a new account executive? I don't know. How do you define that investment of ROI? Somebody said they were good. They were polite. They said, please, thank you and excuse me. I'm going to hire them, right? But I have no training. And by the way, Sandler, just go get training. It can be spin, Sandler, Medic, I don't know, whatever is the thing today. I don't really care. Have a process, because if it's not your process, it's going to be theirs. So just have your own, and it's just easier. It feels better, that way. But in any case, if you go to hire somebody and they're good, when you finally do find a good one, they're going to ask you questions, and you better be able to answer them, because you know what? They're not coming. And the person that you end up getting is the person you didn't want to hire, because they didn't ask the right questions. So when they ask you what's your average contract value, why do people say no? Why do people say yes? Who are your competitors? How long did it take me to sell something? How do I get my leads? You better be able to answer those questions in a meaningful way, or else it's going to be a problem down the road. Not just for them, but for you. Okay, so what I would recommend, and I'm going to get to some of my little tips and isms or whatever you want to call it, but talk to other people that are doing what you do, and learn. And learn from people who are willing to tell you what they screwed up. Because anybody that comes at you in a way that they know everything, it was super intimidating when I started working in tech and venture, because everybody was successful and everybody raised money and everybody was winning, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, right? And very quickly you learn that's not true. The people that you want to work with are the people that are going to lead with authenticity. They're going to be vulnerable, and they're going to tell you the truth. And they won't tell you. Great question to ask somebody. And I've done this with founders. If I'm looking for a job, if I advise other people, ask them, hey, you started this thing, you started it 5 years ago, 15 years ago. What were you wrong about when you started? And if they say nothing, run. Because I want to hear everything that they were wrong about, because it tells me their ability, they're coachable. I'm going to get into my sales thing in a second. As far as like what's a good salesperson, I want to get to the end before I do that. But anyhow, talk to them about what they screwed up, and what was wrong. I've got a long list. My wife has more to add to that. So in any case, so common problems. 5 minutes, we're good. Just some common issues wherever my issues are. I don't have any leads, and the ones I have, they stink, right? So we think it's lack of clarity, lack of ICP. The question is, do we have a compelling story? I don't know, but we've got to peel the onion back. So value proposition, ICP, personas, which I talked about a little bit earlier, understanding not just, hey, I'm selling to AT&T, but I'm selling to AT&T, and there's a guy who's a general manager. His name's Harvey, and he sits in Dallas, and he's got 2 kids. We got to figure that out, right? What's funny is, I'm dating myself. My hair's short, so you can't see how gray it is, but I had to go, I ordered a phone book, from a city to flip through to find out what companies were in the area. I mean, literally, and they're not even a phone book. So anyhow, that's a whole other issue. I'm sorry? Quarters and payphones, yeah. I actually remember the last time I stood at a payphone. That was a long time ago. And that's a funny story when I do my after hours podcast, I'll tell that story. Why is that the payphone? But in any case, but yeah, just some common problems. As far as sending the proposals, I sent 8 proposals. Am I pitching it wrong? I don't know, why did you send 8 proposals? I had a client that I was working with, a wonderful, wonderful guy. That was his pain. I was talking to you earlier, Mike. When I started this, like, God, everybody has problems, like I started this and it's just problems after problem. And my wife, who worked in the IT healthcare sector, she said, that's why they called you, because nobody, if everything's wonderful, nobody's calling. And I was like, yeah, you know what, okay. So I accepted that, that truth and moved on. But in any case, they have these problems. They're sending proposals out. He was sending proposals. He's like, we're going to go through 8 of them in an hour. I said, all right, sounds good. Let's go through them. We didn't get off one because I had to help him unpeel the onion as to why we sent these proposals. Who was in the room? What did you ask? What did you know? Why did they want to do this, right? And it's just, I'll get to my picture at the very end here, but it's just be curious, right? Be intellectually curious. And I'll just say it they say, what makes a good salesperson too, by the way? And it's not just like you're born sales, people are like, oh, you're born, you're an extrovert, you're a born salesperson. I would say everybody in this room is a salesperson because you're doing things that are hard. So number one, can you do hard? And I don't mean just like start a company, because that's hard, but you've done things hard. That's why oftentimes you'll see somebody looking for somebody who's done sports at a high level, right? Because it's hard. Maybe you took care of a sick parent, Maybe you were single, you're a child and had a single parent and you had to take on responsibilities that you weren't ready for. Those are hard things. You don't get to know those things about somebody though until you have conversations like this, but those are hard. They don't show up on a resume either, but you got to have those conversations. You've got to be intellectually curious, ask why, channel your inner curious George. Why is that? I had kids later in life, so I had to learn, and then they were asking why, And then funny, it's always the last thing. It's never I literally had a meeting. I was going to tell this story earlier, but another part of it. But I had a meeting earlier this week for 2 hours. Wonderful meeting, wonderful meal. Enjoy the conversation. And at the end, he was like, "Yeah, I don't really get you, And I was like harsh, So this is recorded, so I hope he doesn't look for it. But he'll appreciate this if he's my kind of guy, and I'm not everybody's, flavor, that's okay. But I said, I'm going to respectfully, kind of push back on you, on that one. Help me understand. A lot of times when I say that, when I say help me understand, I already understand, but I want you to help me understand, what it is you mean. So we were literally getting up. It was so funny. We're getting up, dinner's over. He goes, well, this is what I really wanted. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me that? We could have saved 2 hours, on this. And the thing is, they don't ever tell you until they're done telling you, right? So ask one more. Be curious about that. Be emotionally intelligent. Don't get emotional. That's hard for me sometimes because I don't want to be like, what's your weakness? Oh, I care too much. But we do care. We're investing a lot of our time and our energy into these things, and we do care. But we've got to channel that, right? So I've covered a lot here, and I'll send this out if anybody's interested, and I can make comments if that's okay, if you're interested. I've connected with all of you, and I'd appreciate, by the way, happy to continue the conversations, beyond this. Sales versus growth distinction. I like things in 3 just really, quickly. Sales is incremental, growth is exponential, right? Sales is very transactional, where growth is transformational. And then, sales individual, like I'm working with this AE, versus organizational, type, organizational excellence. So I just kind of look at, and there's a continuum here, right? And there's a skill set too, by the way, and I'm going to have to go through this really quick. There's a different skill set at you as a leader, as an owner, or sales leader within the organization that you're going to need to get to. Sales is a skill set, growth is a mindset. And when I first started this, by the way, I thought everybody wanted to grow. Hey, every company wants to grow. Who doesn't want to grow? And intuitively, they'll tell you they do, but they don't. Not all of them, because they don't want to do the work. So just as far as the journey goes, there's really stage-appropriate things. So you go from the startup, small business, solopreneur, going to the small business where you've got team members. We talked earlier about, we've got 50 people in the room. You go back to your office, and you got 5 or 10 more people there. Then you got family members. So you have hundreds of people being affected by the stuff that we're doing here today. It's the same thing in your company. And by the way, they all have their own agenda. So from a leadership perspective, it takes a different skill set. And it's these transition periods. I can read any one of these books and I can read founding sales, and I'll go do founding sales. I'll get 80%, 90% of the way there if I really work at it. But what happens when I have to go from founding sales to hiring that first salesperson? And what does that salesperson look like? Is it an SDR? Do I hire a BDR, business development rep? Do I hire an AE? Do I have an account manager? Do I hire customer success? Does customer success own revenue also? Do they have a revenue component? I saw that you make the face, so it's a fun conversation. I don't have a strong opinion about it, but people have opinions about that. But these are things you need to know, and we are not born, with these things, and it's okay. So that's why I say find people around you in your peer groups, to get that kind of help. Neil, I think we're about done.
We granted you an extra 5%.
All right, I will keep it to no more than 2. Take-home challenge, do this. What are some of these areas that you're feeling the most pain? Do it, you don't have to do it here. But just think about it and be very specific. So don't just say, I'm not talking to somebody, I don't have enough leads. Like, why don't you have enough leads? What is specifically going on? Is it I'm going to conferences and I get a bunch of cards? People still do cards. I had cards from before COVID and I still have stacks of cards. What is that? And then what's it costing you? Not just in like money, but opportunity cost. Quality of life. How many kids' soccer games have you missed on the weekend because this happened, right? And those things are important to understand because there's a cost to all that. And then what have you done to fix it? And one of the things, I talked about this growth thing earlier, when people say they want to grow, first question I ask, what have you done? What have you tried? I haven't tried anything. Odds are I'm not going to be the first thing, they're going to try. So you kind of have that in your mind like, hey, that's okay. And we can still have a good conversation, but it'll probably be a short one. And I won't be upset that, I sent a proposal and I never heard back, right? And then just how your personal, professional lives would be different if you did this. And, and I would suggest find somebody to help hold you accountable. It could be a spouse, it could be a coworker, it could be another business owner. You got a lot of business owners. It could be another salesperson. But find somebody to hold you accountable to some of these things because I think it makes all the difference. I was getting ready to come here this morning. I got up, I took a little walk. I was listening to a book, audio book, didn't have a hard copy. It's called It Takes What It Takes. And some of you may have heard of it. Trevor Moawad, who passed away about 2 years ago, co-founded a company with Russell Wilson, the quarterback, his brother Harry Wilson, and a gentleman by the name of DJ Eitzen, who lives in Cleveland, by the way. I called DJ. I was on the elliptical. I came back from the walk and I was on the bike. And DJ does a lot of speaking, so they do a lot of coaching, mental, emotional, mind coaching, neutral thinking. All right, and I told him I was going to give him a shout out today after he helped me. But I'm like, hey, what do you think about when you're going to go do this? You kind of prepare for it, but what happens? What do you think? And he just kind of walked through it with me. And when we talk, and he's kind of a peer of mine. I did some work with his company a few years ago, but we just talk and we sharpen each other. So please do that because it does matter. And we talked, it validated a couple things, made me feel better because I still get nervous when I come do this. I really do. But pressure, somebody said, I said pressure, Eric was talking to me and I said, well, that's a lot of pressure, but pressure is a privilege because it means somebody cares. There's some other people that care and that's where that pressure comes from. But in any case, and then lastly, just a few thoughts. Again, I'll send this out. Be storytellers. Be better storytellers. Ask a lot of questions. Try to be different because different is greater than better and cheaper because somebody will be better and cheaper tomorrow. But it's hard to be different. So try to be different. And if you're not, then figure it out. And then and have a process. As I said, it's either yours or theirs. And we will leave it at that. So Curious George, that was my one picture. I had to get him up there. But yeah, be curious, all right? And find a way for you to get to yes with these folks, right? That's the goal, get to yes. So anyhow, thank you guys.